Welcome to the Healing Power of Spiritual Experience. I'm Dr. Jonathan Ellerby, and you are a dear friend of mine. How do I know that? Because you are a friend of Jan Adrian, and anyone who's a friend of Jan Adrian is a friend of mine. I have known Jan and her incredible work at Healing Journeys for quite a while now. I think over 15 years or about 15 years. And I just can't be more grateful for what a good friend Jan has been to me over the years and the different ways she's allowed me to help and be involved with the Healing Journeys work. Excuse me. So today we're going to talk about something that I believe is an often overlooked aspect of the healing journey or the healing path. I've been involved in studying complementary and alternative medicine from a variety of perspectives for about 30 years now. And that means in environments as diverse as clinics, hospitals. Um, I've even done some consulting work for pharmaceutical companies, if you can imagine that. I've worked with indigenous communities. I've worked in complementary healing facilities. I've worked with Andrew Weil as one of his lecturers in the program for integrative medicine at the University of Arizona. I could go on and on and on, and I'm telling you, I've seen healing from just about every side and every stage that you can imagine. And I believe, without a doubt, that there is one element of healing that is so potent and so powerful, and yet strangely so frequently overlooked. And that is the power of spiritual experience. So let's get into the slides I've prepared for you, and we're going to unravel what this is and why it matters. And hopefully, you'll have some important things to test, to try, and to enrich your own life and your own journey. So, uh, my name is Jonathan Ellerby, if you didn't catch that. And I should mention that one of the other reasons why we're celebrating this topic right now is because I've just released a book called The Power of, well, that's not what it's called. It's called Spiritual Experience. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it at the end of the presentation. Let's dive in. So the first question is, what is a spiritual experience? For many of us, we have all kinds of assumptions and ideas about what spiritual experiences are and aren't. And my primary concern around this topic is that too many of us have too narrow a definition of spiritual experience and too impersonal a definition of spiritual experience. When we think of spiritual experience, we tend to think in extremes. So for some people, they're thinking ayahuasca ceremonies and psilocybin mushrooms and psychedelics and all kinds of lights and color, and you leave your body and you might not come back. Well, yeah, I do actually include those in my typology of spiritual experiences, but that's a very narrow sliver, a very narrow slice. Other people hear spiritual experience and they think of visitations from angels or a vision of Jesus, a very religious imagery. Well, those are also in the spectrum of spiritual experiences. And some people think of enlightenment, the great aha, the satori, the mahasamadhi, the Buddha, right? Divine, ultimate realization. It's a pretty tall order. And yes, that is also a part of spiritual experience, but that's not the whole story either. Spiritual experiences are experiences that take us out of the ordinary moment, out of the ordinary consciousness, and into a mode of being, which includes seeing, feeling, perceiving, knowing, and other ways of sensing that we really don't even have a lot of good language for in English. And through these enhanced modes of seeing, feeling, perceiving, and so on, We encounter what is often understood as another dimension of life. And this dimension could seem as exotic as the spirit world. And we are going to go through the 7 key types of spiritual experiences. Or it could include something more like energy or love or a sense of connection or beauty. So there's a wide range of things that this altered state or non-ordinary moment of perception can take us to or towards or into. What they typically have in common is, first of all, that spiritual experiences feel profound. They feel that they are revealing something that we don't normally see in everyday life, but that's something that is always there, but hidden. Spiritual experiences often feel even more real than ordinary things in a way that is instantly compelling. Spiritual experiences also typically have a felt sense of connection, that we are connecting directly with another dimension of who we are, where we come from, and what lives behind the visible world. And I would also say that maybe one of the other threads that runs across spiritual experiences is that we believe we are having a distinctly different perception of our ordinary life and the world beyond. All these things together in different parts and measures add up to some of the consistent elements of spiritual experiences. Now, if you want us to understand them more academically, the first person to really write about this in any depth was a man named William James, who wrote about these things around the turn of the 19th century. He wrote a book called The Variety of Religious Experience. And William James was a psychologist who started off as an evolutionary biologist. I would also point you towards the work of Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neurologist who also writes on the variety of spiritual experiences. Although I will say what's different between my work and theirs is that I am not as interested in deconstructing these things from an academic perspective. I touch on that a little bit. I'm more interested in providing people access to the experiences, how to know when you're having them, what they mean, and how to make the most of them. In terms of what are we really experiencing? Well, this is a big topic and there's no ultimate answer yet, even in the scientific community where we are verifying the consistency, the validity, the neurology of these experiences. It's very difficult to discern how much is within us, how much is around us, how much is beyond us. People ask, is this imagination? Is this wishful thinking? Well, I would say that imagination is an important gateway to spiritual experience, but spiritual experiences tend to have a very robust sense of reality on their own, which means that they often point us towards things that we couldn't have known otherwise or previously, and yet there is a kind of validity to what we see or feel. So in some cases, a spiritual experience might involve precognition, knowing something before it happens. It might involve knowing something that happened a long time ago. It might involve knowing or feeling something that's happening right now, but somewhere else. So non-local consciousness is often a part of spiritual experience. But there's other things that come out of spiritual experience, psychological lessons, lessons about biology, lessons about self, direct insights about healing, or profound, um, profound narrative revival, which means that we come back from these experiences with an instant capacity to transform our story of meaning in a way that is empowering and healing and helpful. Ultimately, I would suggest that what we are experiencing is the ultimate nature of our universe and the very design of its construction. That sounds like a lot, right? But what I mean by that is when we have a spiritual experience, it may have different types and stages and colors and forms depending on our culture and our personality and our age and so on. But typically, spiritual experiences are revealing a kind of direct encounter with the way things really are. In fact, if you look at a lot of the world's religious traditions and ancient scripture, you'll find that some of the sophisticated ceremonial language around what is the most sacred teaching, it usually translates to mean something very simple like the way things are. In fact, some of you have heard of the Tao Te Ching, a great Taoist text, the foundational Taoist text, and it simply means the way, the way of things, or you could translate it as the nature of things. So the point being here that while these experiences, and we are going to walk through them in a little bit, they may seem dramatic, they may seem radical, they may seem otherworldly, but when you review them, when you contemplate them, when you integrate their lessons, you discover it's really all about coming into alignment with the way things really are, broadening our perspective of self and life, and acquiring an invigorated and innovative sense of choice, acceptance, love, and wisdom. It's pretty good, right? Well, let's keep going. How do these experiences help the spiritual journey? Well, in some ways, I've already started to talk about this. Love, perspective, wisdom, help, all these things. But maybe we could be more specific for a moment. Spiritual experiences, first of all, typically take people out of whatever situation they're in and provide what I would call an elevated or outside big picture perspective. Now, why is that important? Typically, when we're facing illness, whether it's chronic illness, episodic illness, a simple injury, or whether we're facing a breakdown in life or some kind of personal challenge, one of the biggest problems that comes along with those things is the narrowing of our perspective. When I say the narrowing of our perspective, I mean that life begins to close in on us. Our stress begins to define us. Our conditions begin to define us. And we have a hard time seeing beyond what we are facing. To be pulled out of that for a moment or a longer moment, um, and know that our experience is limited in time and space, to know that there's an aspect to who we are that transcends what we might be going through, to feel connected to life and even the history of our universe. This higher perspective gives us a kind of spaciousness and a kind of permission and power to rethink who we are, what we're going through, and the assumptions we've made about it. This is ultimately about acquiring a greater context that we bring back to our lives. So not only do we gain new perspectives on things, but from that moment forward, our context changes. So we may begin to know ourselves as souls on a human journey, here to learn and love and help and experience the human life. We may know ourselves as an expression of nature or the grandeur of the divine. Ultimately, we begin to live by a context that is much, much bigger than our life, our family, what we have, or what we do. And that is always a healing, uh, a healing step. Flowing out of this is the personal capacity to transform our story of meaning. Yes, we begin to see ourselves in the scope of the cosmos. Yes, we begin to feel interconnected with all things. And yes, we evaluate our own experiences in a greater context that helps us to manage our reactivity and to feel our sense of choice. But more than that, we can begin to rethink our own unique story of meaning. What are we here for? What is our purpose? And can we even be grateful for the struggles and trials that we might be going through? A new story of meaning empowers us to consider that all life is a healing journey, that life might not really be about getting things right or perfect or always being happy, but maybe it's a process of understanding wholeness, happy, sad, angry, healthy, sick, up, down, inside, and out. Our story of meaning often becomes one that is more soulful when we have a spiritual experience. Interconnection is also one of the hallmarks of most spiritual experiences, and that means that we no longer feel alone. We no longer feel isolated. We no longer feel we have to do it all or control it all ourselves. Interconnection is a key, and interconnection is one of the hallmarks of resilience and transformation. In fact, when you look at some of the great work that's been done on spontaneous remission and longevity, for example, Kellyanne Turner, also a friend of Healing Journeys, or the work of the Blue Zone material that originally came out of National Geographics, and it's now, I believe there's a Netflix special on this topic. When they look at the the habits and the commonalities of the world's centenarians, what we find is that many of the qualities in all the examples I've just given, many of the qualities are evoked and activated by spiritual experience and the invigoration of relationships, the importance of interconnection, the feeling that we are somehow united with the world and our lives are made bigger and more significant by that is very consistent. Of course, this also flows into the significance of relationships. So we find that after spiritual experiences, we are often motivated to make repairs, to make amends, to heal and restore things we have been facing in ourselves and with others. As I mentioned earlier, because of an expanded sense of self and capacity and spaciousness, we also feel that we are not only empowered through our connectivity and energized through our connectivity, but we take ownership of our lives and we feel capable of greater choices that are more aligned with what brings us health and healing. In the spiritual experience, we discover vividly that while health may not always be possible in the measure we seek, healing absolutely is. One of the other remarkable qualities that comes out of spiritual experience through this interconnection, greater context, higher perspective, and so on, is the ability to let go, the ability to forgive, the ability to love and trust that somehow everything will be okay. And it's not even a belief or an idea. After spiritual experience, it is often a feeling that we can surrender, continue with our work, continue with our healing, but surrender to the struggle, the control, the striving, and simply have faith or trust that things are going to work out, that there is a higher order, and that all we can really do is the best that we can do. Finally, what uplifts all these things is a mindset that becomes curious, open, and willing to try things, willing to explore things. And this invigorates our lives and potentiates the power of transformation. Now we're going to move in a new direction. What I'd like to do for you, and I'm going to do this pretty quickly. If you want to understand the 7 types of spiritual experience better, you can certainly pick up the book, Spiritual Experience by me. and you'll get a good description of each of them. But the reason why I want to highlight them quickly here is just so that you understand the range of things that can be considered spiritual experiences, so that when you have these moments, you don't let them slip by. The true power of spiritual experience to heal and transform actually doesn't lie in the experience. It lies in the contemplation of the experience, the reflection of the experience, and integrating the lessons, the messages, and the feelings. The first category or type of spiritual experience I call experiences of truth and beauty. Simply put, these are profound moments of presence and mindful awareness in which something simple in our ordinary life suddenly blossoms with energy and brilliance and connection. Typically, this is when we have a quiet mind and an open heart and our senses become activated. So you could have an experience of truth and beauty walking through a garden, pouring a cup of tea or coffee. You could have such an experience with your pet, or while making love, or painting, or even playing sports. There's really no limit to when we can experience a sudden breakthrough of the preciousness and the beauty and the value of life. It can happen anywhere. And many of us experience it when we're on a healing journey because we find vulnerable moments where we connect with others and we feel that power of love and sharing together. The second category I call ordinary magic. And it's called ordinary magic because typically these experiences take place in ordinary settings, but there's something magical about them, unexplainable, mysterious. So the first category would be experiences of mindful awareness, deep presence, right? Experiencing the brilliance of life briefly, lifting us out of distraction or stress or struggle. But the second one takes us closer to the mystery of things. This is where we have spontaneous and unexplainable remission. This is where we see miracles. This is where we experience radical synchronicities. So the hallmark of ordinary magic is that it's happening typically in waking consciousness, in ordinary consciousness, but something happens, excuse me, something happens that defies logic, that defies science, and defies explanation. The third category, spirit world. These are experiences of spiritual beings outside of ourselves or our imagination. The felt presence of a being in the room, a vision of a long lost loved one, even encounters of deities and divinities, whether it's Saraswati or Jesus. If it's a being that is not incarnated, not in a body, that's an experience of a kind of spirit. And the spirit world has its own pantheon and its own architecture and hierarchy. But the point is, the paranormal world is included in spiritual experience. The next category we move to is divine energy. Now, some people have this gift naturally or spontaneously. We might see an aura. We might actually see a chakra. I actually remember a time in my life where I was very close to someone who was learning acupuncture. And I can't explain why, but for a brief time while I was consumed with, learning what I could vicariously, I found myself able to look at the body and even see little points of light illuminated before even knowing where the acupuncture point was. Hard to explain what that is except the revelation of the subtle energy dimension. Now, in psychedelic experiences, we hear a lot of reports of divine energy, seeing the energy field that we are a part of, being able to observe the energy signature of things, and to be able to interact with them. The experiences of the cosmic self are experiences of the self. That is, we feel that we are still ourselves, but we are in a metaphysical expression. In that metaphysical expression, we might be in a dream flying and we become lucid. We might have an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience. So there is a sense that the self is not confined to the body, and usually in the cosmic self experiences, we get to travel and play and see and feel ourselves beyond this world experience. Experiences of formless spirit have long been documented, and this is where we move into the more explicitly mystical, meaning we sense that we are contacting the ultimate nature of reality, that we are contacting the oneness, the mystery, the consciousness behind all things. And in the experience of formless spirit, we come to realize that God, consciousness, divine energy, whatever you want to call it, it is in this world. It is a part of the energetic fabric of this world, but it is also beyond this world. So that sense that spirit and consciousness is bigger than this life and bigger than this world is a very important part of that experience. And finally, we have the experiences of pure consciousness. And these are what we have heard most about in the Eastern traditions when people talk about enlightenment, when people talk about nirvana, when people talk about satori or mahasamadhi. All these kind of exotic terms and words are really pointing people to the idea or the experience, pardon me, that it is possible for a human being to merge with the oneness of our universe. And in this case, we lose the subject-object perception, and it's an experience of what some people call non-being or non-duality. And in this place, we even lose human thinking. And most of what we gain from these experiences comes after the fact as we sort of remember, as we remember that inexplicable, ineffable experience that shaped who we've become. Now, from there, we're going to move into 12 types of spiritual practice. And again, I'm going to move quickly through these, but what I'm trying to do in this short video is direct you to your capacity and to your options. But after I've come through these quickly, we're going to wrap up with 5 things you can take home, and then we'll be done. So the 12 types of spiritual practices. If you're wondering, what could I possibly do to enrich my own healing journey? If I could possibly take another step on the path of healing and transformation, if I wanted to access the power of spiritual experiences, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go to the Amazon and do an ayahuasca journey? I'd say probably not. Maybe for some of you. 20 years ago, I did actually have that experience in a remote village. This was probably a good decade before it became something in fashion, and it was absolutely transformative. But when you review the stories in the book Spiritual Experience, you'll find that none of them are induced by medicines or drugs or hallucinogens or anything like that. They've all happened simply through spiritual practices. Now, I would suggest you pick a spiritual practice that appeals to your personality. So some of us are mind-oriented, some of us are body-oriented, some of us are heart-oriented, and some of us are what I would call soul or spirit-oriented. Let's take a look at what I mean. So in the mental category, we have meditation, prayer, and sacred study. If these things excite you, if you're drawn to these things, if you tend to do them, then that means you like practices that engage your mind. You can't really meditate, pray, or study some scripture or text or esoteric tradition without conscious discursive thought. And deep immersion in these things can open us to spiritual experiences. But for others, we're more physical, right? We get bored reading and reading and reading and talking and talking and talking and listening and listening and listening. Sorry. We want to get up and move. Maybe you're even listening to this right now and you're already wiggling in your seat or doing some sort of, hip rotation. Sacred movement, sacred sound, and ceremony are really those practices for people that are body oriented. Sacred movement includes yoga, tai chi, qigong. Sacred sound includes toning, chanting, crystal bowls, listening to music while meditating, and so on. And ceremony involves using space and time and objects and color and sound and movement to create rituals of meaning and energy movement. Then we have the heart practices. For some of us, if the heart's not in it, it just don't stick. And that's for many of us, a devotional relationship to the divine, to Jesus, to Krishna, to Allah, or to a guru or a master, or even just to serve life and others. This heart-centered connection is a powerful, powerful vehicle that connects emotional engagement with spiritual learning, spiritual openness, and the healing power of the heart. Finally, we have the more extreme practices, and this includes, these are what I would call the soul practices. This includes death practices that may involve contemplating our own death, coaching or counseling people who are facing death and dying, or simply meditating on our own mortality in a spirit of open-mindedness, love, and the willingness to learn. Ascetic practices are practices where we give stuff up. So imagine a week without your digital life, or imagine 3 days without food, only water, or imagine 24 or 48 hours with no food or no water, or being on retreat for days at a time in pitch darkness. All of these things are examples of extracting or removing the basic ordinary experience in order to connect with something deeper. And finally, the most difficult practice, which so many people say that they follow, although I think it's the hardest one of all, it's the life practice. And that means you make every moment your teacher. You make every moment your opportunity, and you say yes to everything that's happening in your life to bring you closer to love, to wisdom, and connection. Finally, let's close with 5 take-home practices. The first one is simply to do a spiritual experience journal. So try it every day for 2 weeks. At the end of the day, maybe before bed, you take out your journal or your laptop or whatever it is and write down an encounter of one of these 7 types of experiences. Now, for most of us, it's typically going to be the first 2. A moment that just felt, magnificent and beautiful and peaceful, or some extraordinary occurrence that feels unexplainable. This will not only help you to appreciate these things, but to see the value of things and then cultivate an openness to them happening more and more. I would also encourage you to begin praying and meditating with your food and your medicine. That means whenever you have something to put in your body, you pause, you contemplate, where does it come from? What is its purpose? How grateful for it are you, for what it is attempting to do for you? And can you even hold it and cherish it and infuse it with your love and your guidance to be something more for you? I would always consider any time of healing and transition the significance of writing letters and giving gifts. Writing letters and giving gifts is about reconciling and healing your relationship with others, which means releasing pain, accessing forgiveness, and revitalizing your own energy. So if you're facing a difficult moment, think of 5 people who you'd really like to share something with. You want to thank them. You want to appreciate them. You want to acknowledge them. You want to forgive them. You want to let them go. You want to tell them how they made you feel. So you do that, often writing maybe 1 or 2 drafts, maybe 2 or 3, before you find what feels right to share. And you'll learn so much in the process. And giving a gift, something you make, something you buy, something you find, is another way to make this more energetic, more ritualistic, and more meaningful. Of course, I'm going to suggest that you consider the 12 practices that I've discussed and pick one. Just pick one and do it for a committed period of time. So you don't do it when you feel like it. You do it every single day as long as you decide. And of course, if sometimes you're not feeling well, that's understandable. Finally, I do believe that one of the most effective practices or tools to help access spiritual experience is guided imagery. And you can find all kinds of guided imagery online, on YouTube, in social media. Just look up guided imagery or healing visualization, and you'll find something spectacular. Well, it's been a pretty full 35 minutes, and I'm so grateful for your time. My name's Dr. Jonathan Ellerby, and I would love to hear from you. If you have questions, concerns, doubts, you'd love some insight, and it doesn't have to be a paid session. You can just send me a note, and you can find my email on my website. It's my name, jonathanellerby.com, and I'd be happy to help in any way I can with some suggestions, answers, resources, or just another perspective. Again, the new book is The 7 Gateways of Spiritual Experience, and I do hope you'll consider picking that up for yourself or others. And more than anything, I hope there was something here for you today that will give you a little hope, give you something new and encouraging to explore, and ultimately deliver a radical shift in your own awareness, your own sense of who you are, and your capacity to heal and transform no matter what. Thank you.